So I know I presented an overview of the Cedartown District, both the prototype and my layout a few months ago. But this time around, Tom asked me to give a little more information on the locals that run on the line and then show off some of the four-axle power that I've got. So I'll start off talking about the different locals. In the present era, Cedartown District is served by three of them. There's GO1, G67, and G87. Um, so GO1 works Wednesday through Sunday, and it's based out of Cedartown, and it works down to Carrollton and back. G67 works Monday through Friday. It's based out of Carrollton and works the various industries in the Carrollton area. Then G87 runs Saturday through Wednesday. It's also based out of Carrollton, and it does different jobs depending on the days. So on Saturday, it works the industries around Carrollton. On Sundays and Wednesdays, it runs down to Sonoy. And on Monday and Tuesdays, it works out of Cedartown when GO1 is off. So the picture that I've got over here on the right was taken on a Saturday morning where you've got 87 in the foreground and then O1 waiting in the background, 87 to finish up. So we'll talk about GO1 first. They start at 6 o'clock in the morning in Cedartown. Um, and so they'll sort out the cars they need for the day, leave whatever off-spot cars they don't want to take with them behind. The space at Bremen and Carrollton is pretty limited, so they'll frequently leave off-spot cars at Cedartown. Um, right off the bat, after leaving Cedartown, they get quite a challenge climbing Dugdown Mountain. Um, most of the cars that run on O1 southbound are loads, and GO1 has been known to stall while going up the hill. Um, interestingly enough, back before Norfolk Southern bought AC power and started using DPUs, and when they were running coal trains over this route, Cedartown was actually the base of the helper district. So they had a helper to the end of coal trains here. That phased out around 2010 when they started getting the S44 ACs and other DPU equipped locomotives. The first industry that GO1 works is the Legend Terminal in Buckhannon, which is a LPG terminal. So they get the 33,900 gallon tank cars. Um, this was a facility, which I'm sure show the current version of on the right, top right up here. It was formerly Blossman Gas. When Legend took over, they made a massive expansion to the facility, going from a single track with a couple unloading spots to the two-track facility that can unload 10 cars at a time and has room for two off-spot cars as well. The current facility is so big, I model it as it appeared prior to the 2018 expansion on my layout. It's not shown in the picture on the right here, but one of the more interesting car types they get is those Trinity LPG tank cars that have the full-length offset walkway with handrails. No one makes a commercial model of those, so I kit bashed three of them from some of the Athearn LPG cars, and I've got a picture later in the presentation that shows one of those cars. Um, after going through Buckhannon, they come to Bremen, which is where cars are interchanged with the Alabama Division East End. So it's worth noting that from 2018 to 2021, most of the inbound traffic came from the Atlanta North End via a local that ran out of Rome. And that's how it's operated on my layout. Due to space constraints, I don't model Bremen because it takes up a lot of space trying to model the both legs of the Y and the interchange yard. Um, but prior to 2018 and starting again in 2022, Bremen is the primary interchange point for cars going on to the Cedartown district. And now the main line north of Cedartown going up toward Rome is used for storage cars. So you can see picture I got over here on the right is GO1 backing down the north leg of the Y through the alley in downtown Bremen. So after Bremen, they come into Carrollton. At Carrollton, GO1 swaps out their inbounds for the outbound cars, and they're various scenic highlights around Carrollton that I've modeled on my layout. Don't show all the pictures here because I showed a lot of the pictures of Carrollton in the last presentation that I gave. But some of the highlights include this overpass over here, which is still lettered for the central of Georgia. There's the depot and freight house, which you can see in both of these pictures side by side here. And there's the Croft Street Bridge, which is an old wooden bridge that was restored a few years ago that goes over the south end of the yard. The GO1 turns at Carrollton and starts heading back north. First industry that they work heading back north is SLM Recycling, which is located on the north side of Carrollton. At SLM, they load scrap metal into high-sided gondolas. So, just attached a Street View image and a Google Earth image compared with the current status of SLM on my layout. This is going to be the next scene that I start working on whenever I quit weathering locomotives and go back to actually working on the layout again. Continuing north, often they'll end up working Bremen again, so interchanging any of the outbounds from Carrollton before they head back to Cedartown. At Buchanan, the beginning of this year, Inframetals opened a new facility, which is this top picture up here. And they get bulkhead flat cars loaded with steel plate, and that is served by GO1 now. But due to space constraints and due to my layout not quite reaching into 2025, I'm not modeling this industry. Continuing farther north as they get back to Cedartown, up until about 2017, NS served a cement transload called Hat D. It's no longer in operation, but I did model it on my layout. I do note here that Hat D was active prior to GO1 being established. So prior to GO1 being started, the industry in Cedartown and Blossman Gas and Buchanan were served by G87 running out of Carrollton. The next local I run on the layout is G67. So that's the one that works industries around the Carrollton area. In the current era, the two primary industries 67 works are Southwire and the gypsum loadout at Plant Wansley. And these two industries are the largest industries that are currently active on the Cedartown District, and both get a large number of cars each week. So Southwire makes copper wire products. Funnily enough, most of the bus wire that I used on the layout came from Southwire. So they get plastic pellet hoppers. The plastic pellets go into making insulation for the wiring. So they get tank cars of plasticizer, which also go into making the insulation. And they get box cars loaded with copper plate that they actually draw into the rods and later draw out into wire. And a picture of the track arrangement on my layout here with my mock-up structures. Got the overhead view of Southwire here showing the 3 spurs at Southwire that I'm modeling. And then got another street view image showing the view down into Southwire from the crossing. The other industry that 67 works is the gypsum loadout at Plant Wansley. So that's part of the Plant Wansley ash pond cleanup project. So Plant Wansley shut down the coal burning units in 2022, but they're still working on cleaning up some of the pollution that was left behind from that. One of the byproducts of burning coal and then scrubbing it with the limestone is scrubbing that sulfur dioxide out of the coal smoke. You get synthetic gypsum. And so they've ended up with a massive stockpile of that at Plant Wansley. So even now, 3 years after they quit burning coal, they're still loading synthetic gypsum there. Over the years, they've used a variety of cars for that. When Plant Wansley was still active, a lot of the time you'd see, shortcuts of the HYWX coal hoppers running down there to be loaded with gypsum. Now, most commonly, they use cut-down coal hoppers. A lot of those are lettered for DJJX now. They also use various high-side and low-side gondolas for the gypsum. when I'm modeling, when I'm running operating sessions set in the current era, the gypsum loadout's represented by the Wansley staging track on my layout. So can have 67 push some cars or pull some cars out of staging to represent that. Picture down here in the bottom right shows a string of the cut down coal hoppers that are now used for gypsum service. Third local that I run is G87, which on Wednesdays and Sundays runs south out of Carrollton down to the end of the line at Sonoy. Along the way, they work two different industries. There's Noonan Transload in Noonan and Winpack in Sonoy. Another one of the things that G87 does is they'll work the yard at Yates, which is left over from the day when Plant Yates was getting coal trains. Now that yard is primarily used for storage cars and off-spot cars. So I've just got a couple pictures over there to the right of G87. The top picture is at Whitesburg. The bottom picture is at Sharpsburg. So Noonan Transload receives center beams that are loaded with cut lumber and various other dimensional building supplies. So I've got that represented on my layout, shown in the photo here. Got a picture from Street View showing what the facility looks like, and then a prototype photo I took right outside the facility of 87 with a cut of center beam flat cars. Final industry, both on the line and on my layout, is Winpack. So they receive loads of plastic pellets, and with that, they manufacture food packaging films. So it's a fairly large facility as well. They've actually got two spurs back in there, but I'm just modeling one of them. I got my mock-up building there for now, but at some point I'll build a much more accurate structure whenever I get to doing scenery at this end of the line. Then just got another picture of G87 over here on the left with two SD40-2s and one plastic pellet hopper. So that covers the three locals that I run on my layout. In the current era, most of the time those locals run with SD60Es, and while I do have a number of SD60Es, my personal preference when I'm running the layout is to run them with my various 4-axle power. So this is the current 4-axle power that I've got. I've got a couple more that are in work but are nowhere close to being ready for any photos because they're piles of parts in boxes. But up here in the top left is the GP59. This is an Overland GP59 that I stripped and painted and weathered and decaled. Added a few details to modernize it. So I added the ditch lights, added a more accurate 3D printed plow, 3D printed air conditioner. And that's got Loke Sound with Keep Alives in there, scale sound speakers. 552 is a B32-8. This is after NS renumbered them from the 3500 series. This represents roughly 2013 to about 2017 when they were retired. This was built from a mix of an Atlas U23B. So I used the U23B chassis and parts of the fuel tank. Other parts of the fuel tank are 3D printed. The truck side frames came off of the Atlas B23-7 because the FB2s on the B23-7s are much nicer than the ones Atlas uses on their U23Bs. Not sure why they still make two different FB2 side frames currently, but then the shell is a cut down B40-8 shell. So I cut the center section out of that and spliced in the center section from one of the Amtrak P32-8s to get the correct 6-engine door arrangement. Part of doing that had to slice up the sill as well to shorten it a bit. Since it was, all the handrails are made from wire and KV model stanchions. There are various brass and plastic detail parts applied, including a lot of ones that I drew up and 3D printed. So got the early -8 stack, the air conditioner, again, the plow, various other components on here. 5154 is the most recent piece of 4-axle power I completed. This is a Genesis GP38-2 that I added a high nose to and various other details. So it actually started out as a Lehigh Valley unit. I made a whole bunch of modifications too, painted it and weathered it. Did the standard adding loop sound, scale sound speakers, LED lights. Then last piece of 4-axle power I have, which still needs to be weathered, is 7037. This is a GP50 from the most recent run that Athern did. So far, the only thing that I've done to it are swap out the couplers for KDs and add a keep alive to it. Some point it'll get weathered, but I've been working on Dash 9s and SD70s lately, so don't know when I'll actually get around to weathering this one. That wraps up the presentation for today.